early in the morning till 8:30. And then
Signature.
it's a 3:15 till almost 5 o'clock.
Yeah, either or.
You have to leave early.
Thank you, sir. It's just an audit
For a public, okay.
confirmation that they completed it. But
Gotcha, okay.
they did.
This is where I
Is it already audit time again?
Yeah, it's already
Every
it's
year.
done.
Gotta do them every year, right?
Yeah, every year.
Every year. And then they come up and read the report to us that they email to us.
Yeah, sorry to say it's the exact same thing as last year. It's,
Did we use the same auditor?
yeah, we've used about probably need to go out RFP.
We do that, what, about every 3 years?
Yeah, well, 5.
3, 4, yeah.
This organization is kind of interesting because they send me a new, for some reason, the last 3 years I've had brand new people, so they've had teams. So it's not the same
It's not the same person, just the
person
same
doing
organization.
it.
It's interesting how after if like our city changes, all of a sudden they're calling CCUA. And CCUA gets the same because they seem to be right behind.
How long we had them now? 5 years, 6?
We renewed them.
This
so.
is my 3rd year and I've had them ever since. I think it's been at least, probably 5.
Time to change.
Well, yeah, it's time to do
They
something.
get in a rut, and they have all your staff. do
They
the
don't send
work.
you the same auditors each year, though.
No, that's why I just said I had 3
Well,
years.
used to, we got the
So you got a
same
template
girl.
from the previous auditor, I'm
Yeah.
sure that they,
This one was pretty expensive.
2018, 2019, good.
I'm not saying they
This
did.
one's a
No.
lot different because we have a new city treasurer, so we had to update all the forms and a lot of good stuff. So.
No
'Cause
kids yet.
They make you write out all. No, not yet. Probably.
Couple
If
weeks.
I was a betting man, September 3rd was the original plan, but like it's pretty uncomfortable.
Well, I bet so. I would be too if I was
Yeah.
carrying twins. Ooh.
We'll see what next week brings, but that's my
And it's hot.
probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that can't be fun.
Jeez.
My gosh, everybody got a haircut.
We're real lucky.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Wow.
Where's Mr. Ty?
I don't know.
Ah. All right, I do have 6:30, so I'm going to go ahead and call our August workshop to order. Since it is a workshop, no formal roll call or anything is taken, but we're all here. And first thing up, like we discussed at our last meeting, it seems like we have discussed the last 3 months, is our budget. And so basically, if anybody has any questions or anything they want to see changed before we vote to officially adopt it at our next meeting, publish it, yeah.
It's already been published.
Yeah, to change it, yeah, because it's been published, so we can lower, but we can't increase. But is there anything anybody wants to see changed? If not, should we just move forward as is?
Ted has something.
Yeah, unless Ted, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I think I'm good. And I will just point, I know last year we had a conversation a little bit. If you go to the general fund budget, page 7, I believe, 7A, the total expenditures includes all our reserves. So don't think our budget's 8.7 million. That includes the reserves. You'll see it in the less cash. That's probably because this was a newer council, but
Yeah.
the state mandates you spend literally everything you have, even though our spending is cash forward. So just an FYI for next week if someone's looking at it and says, what's going on?
I remember asking about that.
Yeah.
So if anybody works in fundraising like I do, it's just like spend down on a grant.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we have 2 weeks left.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'll be around until I'm not, so give me a call if anybody has any specific questions they want to ask. And even if I'm not around, Deb, my city treasurer, I've been training her quite a bit, and Ty can answer any questions you might have.
We've got your cell phone number too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I know paternity leave and all that, but
Yeah, I appreciate it.
actually this worked out perfectly for your timing in
It
that
did.
regard,
It really
didn't it? Because
did.
it's
I
been
appreciate
published,
it.
so we'll have this on the agenda to officially adopt it and move forward at our next meeting. So, okay.
Alrighty, thank you guys.
Thank you, sir. Next item is transportation. We're going to talk first about the master bike and pedestrian plan, and Ann is here, so we want to.
We're actually going to hand it over to Mitch.
Okay.
Mitch Kaufman with PEC.
See, okay.
So he is the one that has been through it and done the majority of the work. I guess you can sit over there, Jackie. So he was wanting to know what to talk about, so I said, well, just give a brief overview of the plan and see if you guys have any questions.
So Ann mentioned that she distributed this, so hopefully you had a chance to look over it. But Bel Aire was awarded funding from WAMCO through their planning walkable places program to fund 80% of this project. So what we did was we took a map that was developed in 2017 with some future walking and biking routes, and they said we want to turn this into a master plan. Are these the right routes? We want to engage the community. So we did a design charrette, or for lack of a better term, a workshop with some community members. We also did an online survey as well. So we got a lot of community engagement about creating goals for this plan, as well as improvement types, how often people walk, where they walk, why they walk, where they want to walk to, what improvements they want to see. So ultimately, a lot of this information provides background into the nuts and bolts, or what most people tend to focus on, which are the projects. So we have some strategies and actions that are non-capital actions as well, but most people do focus on the projects. So what we've done on page 9 is kind of lays out a future citywide bicycle and pedestrian network. So the red is walking and biking, and then the blue focuses on just walking. And then what we've done is we've prioritized those into some near-term projects. Those can be seen listed on the table on page 8, and then illustrated on the map on page 10.
Well, this is a great plan. It's great that we've been awarded this. It's going to happen. So what questions do any of the council members have?
The good thing for the city is that there are grants out there. And of course, what they like is the master plan, because they obviously we're going to cut up pieces of it and say, well, we would like a grant from here to there. And so they want to make sure that we're putting in a mile's worth or a few blocks worth, that we have, that it's going somewhere. It's just not going to be out in the middle of a street and it doesn't go anywhere and nothing hooks into it. So that's the reason that we felt that it was very beneficial for us to have the master plan, so that we can actually start applying for grants and then show them this master plan and the piece that we're applying for, how that's going to tie into what we already have, or and what our future plans going from that location. Because you can see there's about $800,000 worth if we need to do it all. So obviously we're not going to do it all, but we're going to start trying to piece it out with some grants and things like that. Because LAMPO they have grants as well that we can apply for, but they want the plan first.
There have been grants that we have passed up in the past because we didn't know where to put them. We didn't really have a specific laid out, these are our priorities. So having those will help as we go forward and new grants come available.
Is this actually prioritized A through I2?
That is not in priority order. These are the short-term projects, so basically it's a menu. This based on what we heard in our analysis, this is a kind of a menu to pick from if you want to do something. And as you notice, the cost estimates on the right, those are just construction costs, planning level estimates. But as money becomes available, or you're searching for a grant, and say, oh well, this one kind of fits the bill. Maybe we should focus on it.
So what is a typical prioritization mechanism?
So we look at our vision, our goals, and our strategies that we'd like to move forward, so safety, connectivity, and access. So we look at, okay, so just for instance, people in Bel Aire really want to walk to their parks. So those that provide access to the parks will likely be a higher priority. So it's not only from community input, but it's from analysis like that.
But this list isn't sorted in a priority order then? Okay.
So the next step for us as a city is,
This will be going to Planning Commission in September, at their September 12th meeting, and then it will come before the city council following their adoption.
just want to make sure everybody
The grants that we would potentially go after for these, would they be to implement this plan in a specific area? Like, do the grants typically say for sidewalks around a park, and the grant would drive a priority, or is another step we need to take to actually force rank this as a priority list?
Each grant has, my experience is each grant has kind of their own focus. The Sidewalks to School program has a particular focus of connecting sidewalks and population centers to schools. The Sunflower Trails grant, which was the one that we'd actually passed up a couple years ago, theirs is more wide open, but we've talked about continuing the sidewalks in Central Park, but after talking to them, they said, no, we've already had 2 grants from their organization for Central Park. They wanted a different area. And we didn't have a different area that was quite as ready to go, so we passed that one.
What about the sidewalk on the east side to Isley connection? I think schools, getting connected to the schools is more important than parks. The parents can fit into the park until we get something in.
Right, and we've looked at that, your cost estimate is in here, but one of the big problems with that is the grading. There would have to be quite a bit of grading done in that area, and with all the landscaping, it gets tricky because you have to have a 5 to 6 foot wide area that is at a 0.2% slope. So it's just getting that to fit in amongst the trees and the existing landscaping is a little tricky, so that's going to take a little bit more work. But I do agree that is, connecting some of those routes is very critical. It's just those kind of tricky aspects are going to just drive us up next.
So do we need to have an action item then to prioritize these items to target the grants, or is this enough so that we can just start looking for grants, and then when we get them, we kind of go through and make a priority call then?
That's really up to you. I know when I'm looking, I don't physically go out and look for grants, but when I do hear about them, I see where they would fit in with our priorities and see if there's any opportunities that may exist, bounce it off of Tristan and Ty to see if we have any projects that would fit into those grants.
I don't see that there's a need to prioritize them. We know what they all are, and then like Ann said, we didn't look at, okay, what would fit into this. Would you agree with that, or do you think we should?
Absolutely. From my perspective, it would be, what are you going to rely on as your funding strategy? If you're going to strictly rely on grants, I would completely leave it wide open. If you plan on programming funds in your CIP or in your budget for projects specifically, whether you get outside funding or not, then maybe you should think about that.
Okay.
I think Ty's going to kill me, but I think it should be probably left up to him and Tristan to bring them back to us, so we don't have to argue back and forth. Well, we need this one, and this one, and this one.
Yeah, that strategy makes sense to me.
If they would,
and absolutely,
Take out
we
the
want
ones.
Ann weighing in on it as well.
then and
I would say if the planning commission has a concern with it, then they should bring that up. But
Yeah.
I kind of agree with that we should just.
yeah,
leave
but
it.
they're more of a board that'll come after we decide than, or after Ty and them, and we agree with them, the 3 of them, then it goes to planning commission. So it should be fresh to them.
And I'm comfortable with the strategy of just kind of prioritizing this and funding it exclusively with grants. Is that where everyone else is at on this? Is that it should really be funded with grants at this point?
I think as we sit right now with the rest of the priorities that the city has, I think that's probably the best option. I mean, You
What do
never
you
know what
think,
might
Doug?
happen in the future, and, you know, everything gets sold, and we have plenty of money, then we change our strategy, but at this point, I agree with you, Justin.
Yeah, and, obviously grants typically have anywhere from 50 down to, WAMPO's 80%, things like that, so the city will have to kick in, so that's the other thing we have to look at is,
Okay.
when we're looking at the plan is, number one, will it fit and meet the grant requirements, and number two, can we come up with our portion to fund it?
Okay.
And so, and like with the special meeting tonight, you're going to see a lot of the grants require council support and approval and things like that. So like Betty's saying is we may come to a recommendation, this is the cost, are you, and then are you willing to support that with the match? And then you would approve it, and then we move forward, so.
Now, looking at this as far as the long-term projects, it talks about the future developments. Do we have a plan in place for future subdivisions coming and what is kind of required by them to accentuate this bike and walking path plan?
Yeah, so our codes require that in residential developments that depending on the street, whether it's a main thoroughfare or not, there'll be either sidewalks on both sides or on one side, depending on the use. So as you drive around town, you see that certain, and then cul-de-sacs typically don't. But yeah, so when we work with residential developers, and you're going to see at your agenda next Tuesday, Rock Spring Phase 6, there's an actual sidewalk plan that you're going to see. And so then those will then have to tie into our master plan of 53rd Street, things like that, to get them from the neighborhoods to the schools and parks and stuff.
Okay. Any other questions on pedestrian and bike plans?
Just clarification, these estimates here are just construction costs and not design
It's
costs?
very high level planning level.
That's what I
Like
wanted.
she had mentioned, there's likely some major grading issues that you're going to deal with that project. That's probably not taken into account to the detail that it would actually do.
Okay. Then next, let's talk about the priority list.
Well, Mayor, if we could just jump back to the WAMPO bike plan. I mentioned in one of my weekly updates to council that I'd been approached by Park City and Keachai about maybe tying a master walking, biking plan through all of our communities. And since that time, Valley Center's also interested. So WAMPO has funds, just like to create this master plan for us, that we could have a situation where all of us would join, and Wichita and Sedgwick County, because if you think about it, we're looking at connecting bike trails in Wichita to us, which we have one on 37th, and Woodlawn will have one. So it gets us to that point. But then where do we go from there? And Keachai would like to be involved. And so we've talked about, well, do we come down Oliver? Do we come down Woodlawn? How do we get over to Keachai? And then Park City would like to get people from Keachai to Park City, so that's probably along 61st Street. And then they've even talked about Valley Center bringing in. So we talked with Mitch about maybe putting together a proposal that we would take to WAMPO to fund this. And so again, they pay 80%, and then the 20% would be split amongst all of us that would be included. So I'll let Mitch kind of talk about what he's thinking and how this would work, and make sure that this is something that council would be interested in pursuing.
Okay. So we were contracted through WAMPO to help local jurisdictions develop projects to be submitted for potential inclusion into their long-range plan. And their long-range plan, it goes out to 2040. And the reason you'd want to get projects in there is once you get projects in their long-range plan, they're eligible for federal funding. So first they have to go into their long-range plan. That's basically creates the menu of projects that are eligible for federal funding. And then from there, you can pull them out and apply to get funding through their Transportation Improvement Program, which programs specific dollar amounts to specific projects in specific years. It's a 4-year program. So this is basically step one to get it on the eligible list. So we worked with Ann to develop a list of projects for Bel Aire, and we have 10 projects. So what we'll do is we're currently developing cost estimates for these projects, and then also filling out the project applications for them, and WAMPO will go through and score those applications based upon the responses. So what we have here is just the scope of that project, just generally what that will be, and then some of the background for that project that'll explain it a little more. So this is the list of projects that we have right now with the scope and
bicycle
background.
project, the inner city connection is project number 10.
And what we'll need from you is WAMPO is requiring that each jurisdiction submit a cover letter that identifies the priority of these projects for that individual jurisdiction. So you will need to prioritize these before we submit it to WAMPO.
And it's due on Friday.
And it's
Oh,
due
boy.
On Friday.
Is this the recommended priority order?
No.
I'd be interested in hearing your recommended priority order then.
And something to keep in mind, I think it's helpful to know this, is there's projects in their current program that go out to 2022. So they're looking for projects from 2023 to 2028 that can actually use WAMPO funds. So when you're thinking about these, think about, okay, well, this is generally the time frame that we hope to get this project done. So I think you can think a little strategically about this is, maybe we're going to do a project before 2023. So maybe that's not quite our high priority. What we're focusing on is how can we get WAMPO funds between 2023 and 2028.
So here's a map that highlights what's in here. I will say that I have a priority, and that is actually number one, from the UP to 53rd Street. And there's several reasons. One is that I've already we know the intersection of Rock and 45th is a pain. We hear about that. We know what it looks like. We know how the road is from.
We've been mandating that forever.
And so technically, from the railroad tracks all the way up through the intersection is Wichita's. So that's when people complain about the intersection itself. To us, there's nothing we can do because we don't own that intersection. But I did talk to them and said if we put together a proposal, again, everything that WAMPO does is ranked. And when you have multi-jurisdictions, like 37th Street was one, where we partnered with Wichita, you get higher up on the list for funding because you have more jurisdictions that are going to benefit. So I asked them if we put together a proposal from that in their boundaries through the intersection, fix that intersection all the way up to 53rd, if they would support that. And they said, yes, we would partner with you on that. The other piece is, so we look at where's our growth for commercial. And we know that we've got the intersection of 45th and Woodlawn. That's going to be fixed with Woodlawn improvements. We've got growth on Webb, but Webb's already a 4-lane. So we've got the corner of 45th and Rock, and then of course what we're hoping to do, and we are going to get some development, which you approved, at 53rd. And so I think that would help grow commercial development. We also know that residential development, a lot of it's taking place here in Central Park. We do have some that's heading to the west of Woodlawn. But there is, and that's going to be on your agenda next Tuesday, a new plat for what Gene Vitarelli's doing along 53rd closer to Webb. So, and then of course we got the high school there. The other current problem that we run into, and Ann has brought it to your attention, is the fact that there's no shoulders over there. And it's to the point where, if you get off, your tire drops off. So that is my number one. And then from there on, I'm okay with whatever you'd like to do. But for those reasons, I think that we'd have a good opportunity because we could work with Wichita And then the fact that we already have problems along there, we've got growth along there. I think it would help encourage growth. So that would be my priority.
So, Ty, just a question, why would we, and there probably is a good reason, why are we stopping at 53rd and not going on to Cape 254 and maybe bring Keachai in on that as well? But just a question.
So actually, two reasons. One is the cost. We have to pay a percent of that. So we know that Woodlawn, that's a mile, and we're doing similar things there that we would do over there. So our share is going to be $1 million, $2 million. The other issue is that the road from 53rd to 254 is actually Bel Aire's.
Yeah.
So.
But the service is Keachai.
Yeah. So now whether we could get them to, partner with us, I mean, that'd be a question. But I think probably the biggest piece is, if we can get this in the next 5 years done, we've got 37th we're paying for. We're going to start paying for Woodlawn, and then we'll have another one. So financially, that would be my issue with at least get to that point.
How do traffic counts come into play? Should we be thinking about our current traffic counts as a priority setting mechanism?
Mitch, what do you think?
Obviously, you would take into account all of the information that you have. I think Ann would have probably a good idea if you're reaching capacity. I don't know if you have turning movement counts, but if you have just regular traffic counts between the intersections, that would just give you a general indication of daily traffic congestion. From my understanding, current traffic counts weren't a major issue, except for the Woodlawn project that's going to be fixed. So if your current traffic counts don't warrant kind of improvement, then you're going to be looking at, okay, so where do we want development happening? Where is development going to happen, and where traffic counts are going to increase?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Ty as far as 53rd Street, Rock Road up to 53rd Street, just because, that's one that you drive down and there's a drop off. I mean, it's the way that's graded. I mean, it's, at least you got a Woodlawn, you got a shoulder. I mean, it feels safer than what Rock Road does. My question is, with Wichita being part of this, would they help a percentage of the 20% as well?
Yeah.
That?
So that's what, on 37th, we actually split it. So the 20% local match, they put in 10 and we put in 10. Now that's because that was a full mile. Now, so we would probably look at, okay, the intersection's X amount, from the railroad tracks up to the intersection is the X amount, so your share would be 8%.
Well, and the reason I ask is Woodlawn, obviously, part of that is Wichita on one side, which is benefiting them, and they're not helping on that, right? So
Right. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that they, along with the support, would be kicking in a little.
I think we'd be in the same potential scenario looking at Oliver. We've got that same situation between, I think it's number 5 on here, 37th
Yeah.
and 45th.
My only thing with that, with them not having any housing, basically there's one housing development on Oliver that I don't think they have as much skin in the game as far as
Yeah, maybe not.
they're actually citizens.
Well,
and stuff,
going
so.
to Stuckey they do, and they promised us big bucks on Stuckey.
Well,
They were going to
Stuckey-
bus
yeah,
the kids
It's not really, I mean,
and
it's-
all this kid stuff, and you see kids walking
More school
in the
district
ditches.
Yeah.
Isn't
It looks like about half of that mile is kind of maybe,
Yeah.
the frontage there is covered with Wichita, so it may not be a 50-50, but maybe they do 25 or something. Yeah.
So with all 10 of these, do you need us to put this in order 1 through 10 or pick our top 3? I mean, what do we?
Probably.
I think you need to put it in order. If there's some that you're not interested in, we can take them off the list. My strategy going into this was to throw all the projects I can think of at the wall and see what sticks.
That's what I was thinking.
Because moving forward, I would like the council to have an option of choosing A, B, or C, depending on where we're at. Instead of last year, our only option was Woodlawn. because that's what was on the.
I'm in complete agreement, I think, with our city manager on number one for all the reasons he outlined. So we just have 9 more to go through. And
So should we just all rank our 1 through 10 and maybe send them to Ann and let her aggregate and average, or what's the best way to do that?
Let her tie in Tristan to it.
Let me ask you this,
They know what
I think we
numbers
have a,
we've got.
I think we have a fairly good idea of what taking 1 mile of road from 2 lanes to the upgrade is going to be. What about these, I guess I would consider them smaller projects with like 45th Street, Woodlawn Rock reconstruction of the bridge, and then the 53rd and Rock intersection. What kind of prices are we looking at there? I mean, is that something that, you know, as one of these projects possibly gets selected, you know, we think we could put some back to do that ourselves because it's a lot cheaper of the projects
And just putting these into the Metropolitan Transportation, the long-range plan, does not guarantee funding by any means.
Right.
You've got maybe a 30% shot at actually getting a project funded through WAMPO in that time period. So it's very easy to say, to have a project on the list and say, oh, Bel Aire's going to fund it themselves. 53rd between Woodlawn and Oliver is a prime example. We've got a developer who's very interested in putting that, in developing some property there. I can't remember how many acres, but it's a fairly sizable development. And if that gets started, we're going to have to do that ourselves. We can't wait because that road, as you all know, is just barely hanging in there as it is. So we can always pull it off. We can't put anything on until the next long-range plan, which is another 5 years away.
I was just thinking as far as my priorities, though,
Sure.
if there was something that we thought we would be doing rather than, you know, one of these bigger
Then I would-
expansion of road projects, something like that.
Yep, then
you know,
I would rank
think-
those lower.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of.
So what did you learn from the KDOT review of item 4?
So KDOT's review, we actually have 4 bridges. The first one is at Elk Creek. It's on Rock Road north of 45th Street. That is a bridge that we inherited from the county. They have always been doing maintenance on that bridge, and it's in decent condition. We've got the bridge at basically 45th and Elk Creek that's in okay condition. That's the one that I've been somewhat concerned about, and the Sedgwick County Bridge Engineer was concerned about that one as well. The state wasn't concerned about that. The only thing that they didn't really know is they couldn't see the bottom of it because there's water in it. So they didn't know what the bottom looked like. So that's kind of an unknown situation. So it has to be ranked low, but the overall structure is reasonable. There is a bridge at 37th, and it'd be just east of Oliver on the new section of 37th. We walked that. It looks almost brand new. So that one's in very good shape. The bridge structure that is denoted by the box at 45th and Oliver, just south of Oliver, is not in very good shape. It's 3 corrugated metal pipes. The north 2 sections of pipe, the bottom's all rusted out, it's heaved up, and they're a little concerned about that one. Not concerned enough to post it to prevent anybody from crossing it, but that's going to have to be inspected every year. So that would be probably one of my higher priorities, definitely not top, but kind of up in the top half anyway. That would be easily replaceable by a box culvert, and we can get it out from the bridge size, so it would not have to be continued to be inspected. So it'd get off the KDOT bridge system.
Is that similar to what we did a little bit further north on Oliver, where we had kind of the hole in the street up there?
That's a similar situation with a corrugated metal pipe underneath, but these are like 3 gigantic pipes.
It's 3 of them.
3 of them.
Instead of just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I mean, these ones, they crawled through. They're so large.
Okay.
They're about 4 feet by 3 feet. So they're significant. We haven't seen anything on the surface that would indicate it's compromised. More than likely, the soil is bridging the issues with the pipe.
So this is going underneath Oliver, right?
This is going underneath Oliver, correct?
All right. And that would that be part of a 45th to Woodlawn improvement?
It could be, or it could be a standalone with the 45th and Oliver intersection improvements. And some of you remember that Trans Systems was hired years ago to do an intersection study at 45th and Oliver and 45th and Woodlawn. And the improvements at 45th and Oliver was running around $1 million for the intersection, for signalizing the intersection and putting in turn lanes. So that would, depending on how much has everything costed out, it could subtract from the overall cost of 45th and Oliver. But you'd add in turn lanes. It could be designed in such a way that it would work in concert with any future improvements.
I just know, bridges in general seem to be kind of the top of a lot of newsmakers right now for construction and for grant considerations. So, and the last thing I want is, say it's got to be inspected every year. All of a sudden we have a road closure and then we're in an emergency situation. As we're growing and growing, we don't need a road closure that we have zero control over.
Right.
So I would actually bump that up a little bit. Maybe to,
It sounds like that might be a high enough priority that it wouldn't be something that we consider as a future project for WAMPO because we're likely to do that before the funding era.
You're looking at 2023 at the best, you're looking at the best, you're 3 or 4 years away from doing that project, if WAMPO is to fund it.
That's right. It sounds like we have some significant concern we may be doing it before then.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just take it off the list here.
I agree.
And that's something that we could always do as a standalone, just replace that culvert. But it makes sense to do it with an intersection.
Is it something that we could submit to WAMPO for funding before then through another mechanism? I know we've talked about how sometimes they have extra money and they're looking for projects. Is that only to pull from the list that was put out there 5 years in advance, or can you submit new things for that?
No, it has to be, everything has to be in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan in that gigantic
5 years
list.
earlier.
That's why I'm trying to get everything on it we can possibly think of so we have options in the future.
Listen, I'd like to keep it on the list because I think it gives you the option. You can always pull it off, but you can't put it on,
Yeah.
okay? So I think it'd be better to keep it on there. If we decide to pull it off and do it ourselves, then we do it.
Would that be our number one then? If we think it's the most likely thing that we're going to do in the near future?
I'd be okay with it being a 2 or a 3, I think.
I think 2.
I think number one needs to be a heavy hitter, like the road.
Yeah, like 45th or 53rd.
Well,
Rock.
How does the force ranking affect what's going to happen with WAMPO?
I don't know. I've never been through the Metropolitan Plan project before. I am sitting on the selection committee, so I have a little bit of insight.
So you can get extra alternatives.
I will do my best.
The reason that I'm asking is because if they're going to go and say, okay, everyone's going to get their number one, then I would agree that this shouldn't be our number one. But if that really doesn't have any bearing on the projects that are going to get selected, then or there's some other impact that this priority has, and I'd like to understand that. But.
And they've got a fairly significant sum of money that they're working with. So I think every community is probably going to get a few projects in. How many, I don't know, and it's really all going to depend on how many are submitted. But with WAMPO giving funds for consultants to come in and help us out, help all communities come out and put project descriptions in there, they're hoping they get some pretty good projects.
Yeah, because if it's based on number of projects, then yeah, we probably want our most expensive projects to be rated the highest. If it's based on dollars, well then we should probably just rank them in the order that we think we're going to do them.
Because they've got safety considerations, they've got freight traffic, they've got economic development, they've got bike ped. There's quite a few different kind of buckets that they're looking at projects to fit into.
So are you comfortable then? You've heard a lot of the feedback here. I think we're all generally in agreement as to what we're looking for here, to putting a priority list together, emailing it out to everybody, and that way if anybody has any significant concerns, actually the attorney's not in here, but I don't want to do the whole serial meeting thing, but I think that would be the best course, instead of, or I'm happy when we're here, we can go through every single one individually and score them right now. What is going to make it most comfortable on staff? Because we don't want the delays either.
Yeah, from what I understand, and these guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but so this is a long-range plan. So what you're doing is saying, okay, all of these need to be repaired. We'd like to see them done next 20 years. The priority piece is there's the tip, which is what they're actually funding for the next 5 years. So if you think about that, and we're just one of the pieces, Wichita, Sedgwick County, they got millions and millions of dollars that they want. Andover's even in it. So we're all competing. So I think the prioritizing is more for them and us as staff to say, okay, for the next 5 years, Bel Aire, what do you want funded? We've got your list. We see all these things. According to your list, number one is Rock Road, and we as staff say that's exactly right. And then we go to the board, the TIP committee and stuff, and say we have to have this done. And we got Wichita standing with us. We need this $3 million or whatever it is because of economic development, because of high schools, or sidewalks, and if you get a tire off, you're in the ditch. We got commercial growth happening. We have to have this. And then that kind of helps us with our argument that we're not just there as staff saying it, but the governing body said, yes, this is our number one project, and this is what we want done. Does that sound?
Yeah, and I might add to that. So I'm lucky enough to have Ann on the selection committee, but, what if Ann was not on the selection committee? You as a community are submitting a bunch of projects to 5 people to rank and then put into or not put into the long-range plan. So they get all of this information about, is it providing good access to schools? Is it relieving congestion? Is it helping serve freight? So they have their objective data to say this project is good or this project is not good. But they're also asking for the community to say, hey, this is our top priority. It might not score all that well, or it might score a little lower than this project, but you're communicating to this selection committee that this is our top priority. Maybe it scores a few points lower than the other one, but we want this one funded.
I guess the question that comes to my mind is this something that the governing body needs to make a decision about, or can we use like a consensus, like we're having discussion tonight, and let Ann go and set the priority based upon our discussion here? I guess that's what I'm wondering about, because time is of essence here. You got to have this done Friday. So,
And that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, that we all, yeah.
Well, can we change the priority order in the future? Once the projects are submitted, or is the priority order locked in?
Once the projects are submitted and they get accepted into the long-range plan, then we'll have the ability to choose any one of those that are accepted into the plan.
So
The priority is just.
'Cause here's the deal, there's not one on here that we're all going to go, doggone it, that's the one they're going to fund. We're going to be.
Yeah. So it sounds like the priority issue is not so much an issue for Friday. It's do all these projects look good? We want to submit all these projects, and I think we're all saying, yeah, these are all projects we want to do. And then in the future, we need to have more discussions about the priority order. But I think we all agree that number one priority order probably is the Rock Road.
Yeah.
yeah, but
From a water
you
project
say
perspective.
that they need a priority from us when it's submitted Friday.
Correct.
They do
Correct.
need.
Okay.
Well, and that's
Couple
why
other
David was
things.
suggesting just, and
And
you
so-
know what our number one is.
Right,
You
and so
know,
if
you know
you-
that's kind of what our consensus number one is.
Right.
I think you probably know the shape of all the other ones a little better than what we do anyway. I mean, I know there's certain roads that, I know Justin takes Oliver because I see him turning on the Coke when I'm going down 37th. So, I don't take Oliver. So for me, it maybe isn't as big a concern, but, very soon I'll probably have to take Oliver because my road's going to be torn up. So.
One thing I didn't see on here was Oliver 37th to 45th. That's
I think
not on.
it's
That's
number-
because it's done. Oliver from
5.
37.
Oliver.
It's
Okay,
not
number-
highlighted, but it is on the list.
Oh, it's not on the map.
It's number 5,
Oh, okay.
but it's not on the map.
Another thing I was thinking, since we're looking at all 10 of these, we were talking about how we want our number one to be Rock Road. Maybe number 2 should also be our street and save the, is it the bridge or the culvert for number 3? I don't know. Just another thought in terms of prioritization. Oh, what was the estimated cost of the most urgent bridge repair?
Mitch is still working on those
Yeah, we
costs.
just got that information.
Okay.
And I mainly wanted to get your input.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with myself and Ty kind of discussing this as a priority, we're happy to do that, but we wanted to make sure we brought this to you and got your input.
I mean, should we be looking at a strategy where we want to do, north-south roads and then east-west roads, or do we think we need to do, kind of quadrants of the city? I
You
mean,
better mix them up, or you're gonna have people after you.
feels like we should have some sort of strategy to how we're prioritizing these, whether it's based on, the development that's going in or the traffic counts or some underlying way that we're making the decision other than, well, it feels like we want this or it feels like we want that. I mean, the Rock Road justification I think is really good, and that's why we're all nodding our heads saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But then after that, how do we decide?
Well, the
Some
question
decision
I
criteria.
have is, I guess maybe I'm not clear on the stuff that, I know Wampo gives us the money and stuff, grants. But being we've already had 37th, we're gonna do Woodlawn, what are our chances of even getting any of these?
They're actually fairly reasonable. This last year, when I sat on the selection committee for the projects, they didn't have enough projects for the money that they had available.
Oh, okay.
So that's
I
the
didn't
first
know
time
that.
that's ever happened
Well, it's gonna flip now.
in the history of those that sat on the selection committee
Yeah.
with me. But it's a possibility. It's
They could
always
turn us
there.
down and give the money to somebody else and
Right.
say, well, you've already got 2 big projects that
And,
we did.
and a lot of it's based on
Growth.
need, growth, the safety improvements, how much it's going to affect the regional system, and regionalization is what a large part of it's based on.
Okay. Well, I just didn't want you guys to get your hopes up and we don't get anything.
Is there anything that stands out on the
Gotta-
list
gotta
that's
ask
like
for
this
it,
should be last?
What happens though in a lot of cases, not all cases, is they say, well, we got funding for a project, but the community isn't ready. So they go to the next one.
The chances of all of them happening is pretty low.
What's your least travel?
Somebody ready?
Yeah, if they fund all of them, that would be a really good problem to have.
Yeah.
Will we have enough money for the match?
Yeah, that would be a very good problem to
Biggest
have.
question.
Yeah,
So,
I-
Jackie,
I-
Some bridge would pass.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how we can prioritize these, because we need to have it done by Friday. Everybody agrees the number 1 would be rock, but could everybody review and then send an email to Ann saying, well, my priority list would be rock and then whatever number, and then Ann could then take all of that from the governing body members and then create it? Is that okay?
Yes, because
Okay.
it's part of the workshopping process. It's not
Okay.
coming before council as official city business, and because they wouldn't be including other council members in the email influencing or saying, don't you think the same thing kind of language, so that.
And I actually would like it to start with a suggestion list from our city engineer.
And what we could do is we could also send that, because we've got traffic numbers, so, that's a lot of times what you look at is traffic numbers.
Okay,
So-
today's Tuesday, I'm going out of town, so can I designate somebody to do my
This has to be done before Friday.
I agree. Traffic
I'm
count is
leaving
probably the
it
most
off.
objective
tough
way to do
schedule?
it.
Yeah.
So we could send out a
I'm
map
leaving
with
in
the
the
traffic
morning.
counts, so you can look at that.
I won't
and
be
then
back till
Ann
Saturday.
could give you
So
some.
it'll be-
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, I think
Let's,
it's the only thing to consider, because you've got to think about the planned development there too. If we've
Yeah,
got
it's
commercial
all-
development there, something
Right.
like that will drive a significant traffic count change, but it's a good starting
Well,
metric.
and the other
maybe.
thing, if you look at Oliver, a lot of that traffic isn't even Bel Aire people. So I mean,
No.
do we really want
To keep
to put
Yeah.
that as a priority, because it affects less people.
Toll road.
You know, even though one of the other roads have.
You saying you don't have Wichita residents in your ear?
That's right.
Even though one of our other roads may have a smaller traffic count, if they are pretty much all Bel Aire, we know they're all Bel Aire, compared to, Oliver being more of a thoroughfare compared to, I know some people use it, but.
Okay, so let's.
I hear what you're saying.
Let's do this. Let's have staff send out an email, earliest convenience. We know, obviously, it's going to take a little bit of time, maybe in a short little nut graph about each one, about why, we think this is number 2, why this is number 3. Obviously, we don't expect every last detail. We trust you. You guys are good at what you do. And then if you could email that out, then if any of us have any, I disagree here and here, we can reply all and continue that, but no, yes, no?
I trust Ann.
Don't reply all, just, she sends it out individually, reply to her.
Okay. That's why I was asking for clarification.
Yeah, so let me clarify now. I think that there's an important fact that this is never coming back to council for decision. So
It's not binding.
today
Right,
is
no.
designating Ann or staff, allowing staff to make that decision. You can always individually talk to staff about that decision. But Ann is, there's a fine line between designating Ann to make that decision and then designating Ann to collect the votes and essentially vote outside of a meeting.
Okay.
So you don't want to do that. You want to designate Ann, make the decision, and give her your feedback in the future.
I think that's what we're doing, and that way if anyone has any major objection to what is emailed out, we email her and, right? Okay.
This is not binding action, is it?
No.
No, not the way you're doing it right now.
Okay. I didn't think it was, but okay.
So she's going to send us an email and we email back it's okay or not okay.
Right.
Okay.
Or if we have any comments or thoughts we want to share with Ann, we can send those to her. We're not actually approving it because Ann's going to make the decision. But if we want to have some input after she's already put that together, we can do that.
I can do that.
Okay.
Just do what you want to.
All right, then we're going to move on. And
So I will get this done tomorrow morning and sent out.
Perfect.
If you guys could get back to me by
Yeah.
the.
If we don't like your list, we'll get back to you. Otherwise, assume.
Probably like Wednesday evening, Thursday morning would be great. And then
Okay.
is that enough time
I can do that.
Okay.
Well, let's say by Thursday, 10 a.m. Let's set a hard deadline for that. That way, you send it out, and then you get 24 hours with it.
Well, as soon as you send mine, I'll send it back.
Okay. All righty. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and of course, Jason just stepped out. Oh, there he is. Let's talk about the Woodlawn project.
All right, well, good evening. Mr. Engelmeyer, the smart guy on this team, is dealing with a little bit of an emergency situation on a bridge or a street next to the bridge, and some of the kind of gets washed out, so he apologizes he can't be here this evening, but I'm here to try to give you a little bit of an update on where things stand, and Ann's going to correct me where I might get misguided a little bit. But right now, I believe KDOT is reviewing a set of plans, and we've been hearing a little bit of back and forth, a few little questions from them, but I think it's pretty standard, and as soon as we kind of have information from them, we'll be able to make further, reactions of what we may need to address, that from their vantage point, what they're seeing. The other thing I just wanted to mention is part of that is construction sequencing, and that was one of kind of the tricky things with this project is how do we maintain certain directions of access along Woodlawn to the neighborhoods, to the fire station, etc. During this whole process. And so generally the thing that's going to happen in the first 4 months is kind of utility related, so water lines and sanitary sewer and items like that don't really cause lane closures. We're not seeing any lane closures And I think on our schedule, that kind of happens during later in the year, so latter half of next year, kind of working through the winter. Some of the advantage of that, as you recall, is you can't do much paving work anyhow during the colder months. So strategically, that kind of works out well then. And then what will occur is kind of in the next month period, there's storm sewer improvements that kind of happen throughout this. I'll just mention that. But we're going to start building at that point temporary aprons on certain portions of the road. At the far south end, south of 39th Street, which is south of the railroad there, on the east side, there'll be some temporary pavement, and that will allow traffic to continue north and south from 39th on back to 37th Street, that section. North of there, you're only going to be able to move going northbound throughout the process. And that's even going to be that way for the fire station for a brief moment of time, because we're going to be constructing a temporary access shoulder, or a little more pavement if we need it, on the west side, kind of out in front of the fire station and there, so we can be, what's going to be occurring is we're going to be building that so we can shift traffic around and start removing portions and constructing portions of the eastern half of Woodlawn as we move forward. I've got a display of this. I don't know that we need to go into the weeds that far, but there's just, that's kind of, and then what we're going to do that's kind of a unique thing is to get the fire station where they have access back to Woodlawn, we're going to go ahead and utilize the frontage road that's there, and they will be able to go one way, and we're basically going to have to do something that just allows them only access. We'll have to build a little temporary drive, if you will, along the edge of the lake that's there on the west side. And then they'll peel in and get back on in front of the railroad and be able to, that will give them emergency service for that duration of the project until we do get things going both ways again in the 3-lane section. So I should mention regarding the fire department, Jay did go and meet with them and discuss the median. And of course, unless you add enough lane, they're not in favor of a median that would interrupt their ability to navigate traffic. You can do what you want, but it kind of works out nicely in the 3-lane road section to not have a median, because it allows our traffic to be pushed over so that we can be working on, demoing and building a whole new street section on the other side. Without, if you have the median in there, it starts to really limit, almost where it's the point where it causes us more expense to do more temporary patching, if you will, to make the project work. So that's kind of the basic nuts and bolts of the early part of the process, and eventually we'll get to the point where everything's done for the most part on the west side. And then we'll start moving over, to the east side, and then we'll start working on, we'll move traffic back over to the east, start working on the western half generally. There's a few little zigzags in there still. But, and then kind of after that is accomplished, kind of at the tail end of this, we'll be working on the intersection of 45th and Woodlawn, just taking out quadrants of it and shifting traffic around so we can finish up one quadrant to the northeast, move to the northwest, kind of things like that. Budget-wise, and please interrupt me if you have any questions anytime through here, and if you have anything you want to add in. But budget-wise, we appear to be right on track with which we've been telling you. I just kind of highlighted, we've got contingency built into our base prices here, and so we're sitting at about $5.6 million for the street improvement. And then, of course, we have the water and the storm, or the sanitary rather, that's separate, kind of at-large projects. But if we add another contingency, so if you assume kind of like 20% contingency, that does push us up into like $6.2 million. But just wanted to let you know that it appears we're on budget. The only thing I'd want to mention to that budget, and this is fluid still, but right now we have still a pretty measly, what I'd call landscape or beautification or amenity kind of, budget. We've got a kind of 100,000 plugged in there. For reference, we just got bids back on a project in South Wichita. It's called Steeple Bay. The Lang Development Group is doing it. It has Splash Aqua Park is there if anybody had kids or grandkids that have gone there, but it's kind of a half mile of boulevard street. It has a 20-foot lane, so it's not apples to apples, but the budget for just the landscape with tree plantings, it does have sod, which we need to discuss how we do certain things or want to do them, but just the landscape alone was like $300,000. Now we had a lot of stuff in medians, and so if you remember when we did the public workshop, we talked a little bit about beautification, and the reason we haven't really started on giving you anything yet is we want to really get kind of the pavement nailed down, the hardscape, before we have ideas, we've talked about them, but we don't really want to get into the weeds on that until we really have the pavement set. So, but I did want to start to get some feedback related to that, because that is going to make a difference on our thinking coming up here on what you really want to be able to do. I would tell you that we don't need to go crazy on tree sizes or anything like that. I think it's better for you as a city to plant trees that are in that 2.5 inch and smaller caliper. If you want to do something special by the park or something, we can, but just maintaining those is a lot easier, survivability and such, when we go with the kind of 2.5 inch and less. So
I think they ought to be Christmas trees.
We need 2.5 inch Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Well, as far as the median, so are we still?
So in the current version, there's
Right.
no median in the current version, except for the railroad will require, just like what you're seeing over here on 45th down by Hillside.
Okay.
Hillside, yeah.
What is?
37 has it too.
Yeah.
They got a
Okay.
median there, 37.
Yeah. So, and it won't have any plantings in it necessarily unless you want them. They typically just have a paver or something in the center.
But
That
it'd
would be the
broad.
basic.
What's the lane width currently?
So our lane widths, and I'm going to say high edge to high edge, which means the asphalt portion. The curbs we don't count in the calculation, but they're 12 foot. So we have kind of 12 foot, and then I think the middle is maybe just a hair bit wider because of the curbs, so it's like 14 or 15, something like that, and then 12 foot again. On the north part, and the south part obviously is 5 lane with a continuous turn lane in the center. Kind of that chicken
But
wing.
you said curb to curb, and you said no median, so I'm confused.
Okay, sorry. So when you think of a street that has asphalt, there's the curb beyond the concrete portion. The lane width does not include any of that curb. It's just the asphalt.
Right.
So the curb on the outside is 2.5 foot from the back to the gutter pan, the far edge, the high edge they call it. And then you have a 12-foot lane. And then the center median, I think it's more like 1 foot 9.
It's a little bit wider.
But we're not going to have a center median, right?
The center turn lane,
There's a center turn lane.
that there is going to be, that's correct, there's not going to be a center median, but there's a center turn lane, and those are generally a little bit wider for safety aspects, because since you're pulling into that from the two directions.
Yeah, so like I said, that was the fire department's request. They do have this thing called Appendix D. It has all their rules and stuff in it. You're not necessarily, as a city, I don't know how it works, you're not necessarily obligated to it, but for safety reasons, there's a reason why they require 20 feet on, if you were going to go build Walmart, Supercenter, or Quick Trip, it doesn't matter. You've got to maintain a fire lane that's at least 20 feet when you're a certain distance from the building. So, and as an example, where we've, in like the city of Wichita, I think we maybe said, go take a look at, if you want to see a current 3-lane kind of project in a residential type area, you could go over to 127th Street, south of 21st and north of 13th. The differences there is they actually have a bike lane that is incorporated with each direction of travel. when you throw that bike lane in there, you're sitting at 20 feet plus. So that's a difference.
Is the
It has a center median on that particular street.
right? Is the 20-foot lane with a median, is that still even feasible for Woodlawn? Or I forget exactly. It was kind of,
I think we
we were looking at it, but we didn't really.
spent like $1 million something extra if we went to 5 lane the whole distance.
It's extra costs, but it still would be, it would be feasible at this point. The MKEC has done enough work that there would probably be some extra design costs to make that change at this point.
So basically, if we wanted to have medians at this point, we would need to have wider roads than we previously planned. And if we wanted to keep ourselves aligned with the fire code.
It'd probably be, they'd get pretty grumpy, I'm sure. I don't know what they could do to you, but
We'd have
they
to
are
be,
your neighbors.
we'd have to be at the width of the 5-lane road.
And the key takeaway from this is Jay had not talked to the fire department before the medians went in, although it was mentioned very early on that they typically like the 20 feet.
Now,
We thought we might be able to get around that.
I guess my one question is, I mean, because obviously they don't have a lot to say with the median that goes along the railroad tracks that's required. But what about just having that one small section of median for the pedestrian crossing to have like the.
Okay, so you could definitely add in a small section. I don't think they're going to get bent out of shape at all on small segments. From a cost perspective, if in the future you could already have that piece in there and it could be something. The road is short enough now that from our standpoint, it's not
Needed.
It's not as necessarily as it's easier to get across. You don't have as far to get. So you don't necessarily need it from a cost standpoint. If you still want to have something like that, it could still fit in there, and it could be shorter.
It also seemed like the last time we looked at those various crossing options, the crossing signal, looked like those made the prospect of what we originally talked about not necessary. It looked like those other signaling options would create a situation where a pedestrian would be able to move across and not have to worry about stopping halfway. That kind of went away. That was my takeaway from that.
Yeah, it's got timing built into it where you should be able to get across. I mean, that's
because it's stopping traffic. It's not like making halfway and then getting to the other end.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that could be added or revised in the future when we do expand it out to 5 lanes.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I don't know how likely it is that you'd want to do it, but you could always peel pavement out when you go to 5 lanes if you really want a median.
It would be a limit. It's a very limited extent.
That's right. We don't have like.
So it would be fairly simple and
True.
not too much extra cost.
Right.
Okay, so whereas before we thought we were going to have a decision on medians, it sounds like that's not a real decision
It's kind of
anymore.
been taken away.
So,
Right. Unless we.
But we were all concerned about making sure the fire trucks had the appropriate access, and so I think it's good that we have a definitive answer on that.
And I do appreciate you guys looking into that because that was one of those things we wanted.
And again, it does help us make the construction sequencing work so we can keep traffic moving and build the road. It does make a big difference in that. So as big of an advocate as I am for the median, it kind of dawned on me the only way to really make it work is if you do have to pull the trigger and do wider lanes, or at that point we may just maybe we just do the whole thing. So that's kind of been my takeaway through the process.
And the beautification.
Yeah, now, I still would say, when you go to 5 lane, and you all know this, and this is, once again, I'll tell you my personal opinion, that median makes a huge difference in the way a street feels when you start getting out there to 5 lanes. I mean, if you go drive 21st Street east to Andover, it's like, if those guys don't accidentally land the 747 on it, So
I got to use my cruise control on that road.
Yeah,
I do.
So I would still encourage us as a city to think about that when the opportunity comes. I think you should, and maybe there is a small spot. Maybe there's a spot that we could just pick on, like the crosswalk or something, if it makes sense. That would, I think, be easy if it's limited length. So it might be a nice gesture.
Yeah, well, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to put a little bit of beautification along the walkways and stuff.
And that's where I kind of wanted to go. So you have a lot of options off to the edge. I know we've mentioned kind of water harvesting and rain harvesting. It's really up to you kind of on the next step on how aggressive you want to be, or how, it's going to, anytime you do something that's above the normal, it is going to cause extra cost probably. It's going to cause a little extra maintenance perhaps. You may save in a lot of other things. It may be doing some really good things. Like you may not need to, I brought some pictures. I think I brought some pictures. And you've seen these before. And but if you go with something, let's say that's on the side that kind of looks like that, and you squeeze in landscape like that in certain areas, then not necessarily. It's going to take some, especially in the early end, a little more effort to accomplish that. And then, is that what you want to see? I mean, it's going to be more wild. If you try to make it nice and perfect, you're going to spend lots of maintenance trying to keep it nice and perfect. But if you let it be a little bit wildly use native plants, you can accomplish things like this.
And still get that splash of color and that.
Yeah, and it's more a textural thing, I'd say, Mayor. It's in our area, I would strongly suggest you concentrate on the grasses and things like that, because the flowers only last for a short time, and we can get into all that detail. Some other things that work really well, though, and pretend that this doesn't have as much hardscape. In both of these scenarios, there's ways for us to route some of the water from the curbs into these depressions and still have ways to pick up this water behind it. But these things are all going to cost you a little bit more to do initially. They may have some savings in the future, but they're hard to they're the things I kind of told you about. They're more almost feel-good sort of things, and they do help. But they're going to be, I think, somewhat small in scale. But you do have opportunities to do some of this occasionally or in great portions, and especially in front of the park. We've talked, there's big opportunities in front of the park that would remove that one section of the frontage road and really start to make a nice front door to the park. So, and then of course by the lake. Sorry.
So where you are in the design stage, these are still opportunities.
These are opportunities. I wanted to just make sure that you understood that right now we need to prioritize in your budget and your thinking, how much are you willing to go out and spend, because we have $100,000 in there now. I don't know if I ever told you the number. Yeah, $300,000 for just landscape. And we would have done something kind of like this in our median. So we have a half mile of it, if you will. It's not continuous. It's got breaks and stuff in the median, but it's very expensive when you start putting in live plant material. I would probably not steer you towards trying to do something with seed in an area like this, because it will frustrate you probably, and it will frustrate the citizens.
Well,
because
as far as the design, though, I think it's important to think about the future also as far as the widening of it. We don't want to spend a bunch of money putting something beautiful in that we're going to 10, 15 years, even 20 years down the road, you're just going to have to take it all out anyway and push it. So
yeah, and then what I guess I should say is you would probably want to try to work something like this into where it's back beyond. Yeah. Because I think we're going to set the sidewalks and everything like it would still accommodate the
5 lane.
Right.
Yeah, I think in front of the, like you said, in front of the park, in front of the lake are the big opportunity areas.
Yeah, and maybe you can help us think a little bit about, as we consider these different options, what the impact will be on staff and public works to take care of them, and what that'll look like from a cost perspective. Because I think we've got to be really mindful, not just of the initial cost, but of what the ongoing cost is, and make sure we're resourced to take care of whatever we put in there.
Right.
So we don't have to vote.
Well,
honestly,
there's a trade-off. There's some trade-offs. I mean, Jeff knows I don't spend very much time mowing. I spend a lot of time walking around.
No, I like. I mean, if we have an opportunity to put in something like prairie grasses,
yes,
that is lower maintenance than mowing the lawn type of look. I'd like to look at that, definitely.
Right, and Prairie Star Parkway, I think I mentioned that one to you if you're ever up Kansas City area, over in Lenexa, go up there. All they did was plant prairie grasses. And they can mow them, but they did plant a lot of live plant material. And what we've also done sometimes is we can take buffalo sod and plant buffalo sod, and then within that we can spread the seed for a little variety of a little bit taller stuff. We don't want anything big and tall, but we can definitely put seed right on top of it, because I think that will be one of our options that we should consider. That's what we do on most projects elsewhere in the metro area is a buffalo sod if it's not going to be irrigated.
Do you have any pictures of buffalo sod?
Not with me, I do not. But I'll tell you this: if you want it to look like perfect grass, like a fescue lawn, it's you got to have someone that's really kind of got it down. If you want to try to keep broadleafs out of it, but if you go with something that's more like this, it'll be way easier. And I would mention, as an example, if you all would go look at what's our park over here at Oliver and
Alley Park.
Yes, Alley Park. That one is a buffalo. We seeded that 15 years ago or whatever it's been by now.
20.
And there's a lot of little flowers and things like that will pop up in there, and it can look pretty attractive.
Just don't make it look like that hill over there.
They got to mow that more. Just you can really
That
make
looks
that look
awful.
good. They just haven't mowed it
That's
enough.
not my idea of wildflowers.
So, yeah, you have to be very diligent and doing.
Does they'll take over?
Well, you just get weeds for a while. I mean, it eventually will get there, but it could be a long time.
Oh, it's already been a long time.
Yeah, if you mow it, you can get there
I
much
think
faster.
Pete did that, didn't he?
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have some more conversation before the first bulldozer arrives, but
Yes.
looking forward to it. I do appreciate the update. Any other questions that we?
I still think you need to leave the medias blank for a while and just put fake Christmas trees out there at Christmas time.
And we can have a contest.
Have the little kids come decorate them.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Gish, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on. Spend a lot of time talking about roads today at this workshop, the K254 KDOT priority. Before we talk about this, I just want to share that 2 weeks ago, Ty and I met with a couple of developers looking at a big chunk, and that was one of the big things they asked about when we mentioned, hey, coming up real soon is the priority off the K254 and getting that. So it's big towards economic development. And developers are asking those questions too. So I have a option here. We do have, there's Oliver and Woodlawn, and then we have, Rock and Webb and Greenwich and different options. So I'll turn it over to kind of Jeff and Ty, who have sat on that task force.
So with a little history is, of course, we've got a new governor. New governor comes the new Secretary of Transportation. Mm-hmm. And the old, the T-Works program that they had, 10-year program that was done probably 12 years ago now, expired. So this new secretary is looking at basically what WAMPO's doing. Okay, what are we going to do for state highways over the next 10 years? And so they've been going across the state in different regions and asking stakeholders, cities, individuals, what do you think we need to be spending our money on? Again, these are state projects, not our projects. So South Central Kansas, through the Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce, created this transportation coalition, and that's where this map came from. And so the idea is that there's strength in numbers, and if people agree on priorities, then those get moved to the top. And so obviously everyone is agreeing that the North Junction should be their top priority. And Wichita and Sedgwick County is putting funding in it. They understand that at KDOT, and they're trying to move that project forward. But then they also want to know what other projects, besides the North Junction over the next 10 years, do we need to be focusing on? So you can see that K254 is on there, and that's something the association has pressed for last year when they started the whole process to get this new transportation plan in place, and they were asking for what those project needs to be. Jeff went and to a legislative, not a hearing, but fact-finding meeting, and the mayor was there as well. It was in Wichita, and that's what got 254 on their radar. Now, the next piece is over the next 2 months, they're going to be the KDOT's going back out again and saying, okay, so South Central Kansas, you've got all of these different priorities on here. What are the specific projects that you say 254, but what does that mean? And so the first thing that everybody is going to say is our priority is the North Junction. And I think we would all agree that is important for Bel Aire because most of us use that, if not daily. Our citizens are using that to get downtown and different places around. And we border 254. So what I did is I asked Ann and the chief to go actually drive 254 that borders Bel Aire, that touches Bel Aire, and give me and your thoughts of what should happen along there. So this is where this list came from. Not asking you to prioritize anything, but I wanted to throw it out and get your input. Does this sound correct, or do you think we need to do something different? The big question that really you need to answer tonight is that KDOT is looking at, and they've talked about another interchange. Right now, their discussions have been at Greenwich. So the question for you is, do you still think that's appropriate, or do you think it should be at Webb? They do have a policy that they don't want them every mile. So there is one at Woodlawn, so Rock is out. So it would have to be either Webb or Greenwich. From the county standpoint, I think they would lean towards Greenwich because Greenwich goes north. It's a county road, goes north, clear up into Newton. Webb, it turns to gravel on the north. From our standpoint, Webb is a 4-lane. We've got a lot of development going along there. So we could make the argument that it's a 4-lane that pours into 254 major highway, and something needs to be done there, and maybe not Greenwich. And so that's where we've kind of threw in the idea of, so if we're going to do a interchange at Webb, then we would look at doing frontage roads between Rock and Webb, and then Greenwich and Webb to get the traffic to those. So the question that I need answered from you all would be, where do you think that interchange needs to be? Because the mayor and Jeff will be representing Bel Aire on K254 and the city going to the legislature when they're here in, I believe it's November, giving your suggestions. And so...
Which highway has the most accidents? Greenwich or Webb?
I think Webb right now.
And say, if you look at 254, the state statistics say the most accidents happen in front of the Walmart in El Dorado. But
Apples and oranges, man.
But along there, and I'm going to lean towards Webb for all the reasons that our city manager just pointed out. The economic development alone, it does stink that that's gravel on the other side, but I lean back towards, and I don't think it's not just the economic development for our city, but you also look at, the WSU is pouring millions out there into that into that technical college, and you've got all the medical facilities that connect to K96. Again, I go back to the tour that Ty and I gave on Wednesday, and we really showed that here is the sandwich, the opportunity in between K96 and 254, and it was basically all Webb. The conversation kept going back towards Webb, having access off of that.
Did you talk to County Commissioner, Lord, about Furley?
Yeah.
About what the plans were. I know because he said something about development out there, but
Yeah, I have not, no, I didn't reach out to him on that, I forgot about that.
here's kind of my thoughts on it, and I'm going to share it with y'all. And the entire road at some point needs to be turned freeway. I mean, the state's plan to take a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road to freeway is you take the 2-lane road, you add 2 more lanes, it's all separated with not limited access. And then they're supposed to go back with traffic studies, with accident studies for safety, and then fix it to be a freeway like 35 is, like, because at one point 35, didn't have overpasses everywhere. Kellogg certainly didn't have overpasses. It took you 45 minutes to get from one side of town to the other because all the stoplights. But I think that if we truly want to turn this into a limited access freeway like it should be, and once North Junction is finished, I mean the traffic is going to increase. It's going to become even more a major corridor from freight wise from El Dorado with the turnpike, and then he's getting anywhere from North Wichita or West Wichita, and that's the fastest route. I think we should shut down Rock completely and not have access there. I think if you keep access even turning, I think it still is too much, especially when you talk about the high school being there with a little bit less
Experience?
Experience. Thank you, man. It's Tuesday. Less experienced drivers turning in on that. I think an overpass at Webb makes sense economically, both for Bel Aire and Keachai. I mean, because Keachai doesn't go to Greenwich, Bel Aire doesn't go to Greenwich. So if you put that there, you're not getting the full benefit that you can. I mean, is the county really, going to be as aggressive as the cities could be for the economic part of it? I think that's something we could throw to them too. And then you put the frontage roads, and you put a frontage road along a major highway. I mean, there's infinite amounts of places like that all across America now that businesses are just lined up on that frontage road, and I told the KDOT people, I said, yeah, we shut it off. If anybody's got a problem with it, I'll go talk to them. I got no problem with that because I know that the people who have lost loved ones on that road don't really care if they're inconvenienced a little bit. I mean, because they're more than inconvenienced the rest of their life. So in that fact, I think if we truly want to show the state that we are serious about this being a limited access freeway, I think the plan to shut Rock Road down completely, it would be the best idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
don't
that's
drive
right.
it anyway. I go down.
And that would be a good way to too. If they're saying, "Oh, y'all want just Bel Aire," no, look, we're saying Rock Road too, which is all Bel Aire. In exchange, I'm sorry, Jim, you've been trying to say something first.
Well, I just think that that's the right thing to do. You need to have that interchange road. It makes the most sense. I understand maybe some of the folks in the county are thinking Greenwich because, or Greenwich because of its continuation, but that's because they don't live out here. And they're looking at a map, and the ones that live out here know what's going on and how it's developing, and you're not going to see that growth out there at Greenwich for a while.
Right.
I mean,
To me, Greenwich is
Huh?
more of the road to nowhere, more of the Commerce Park type traffic as opposed to that. I mean, that's what I see there. So we've had, Jim and myself both have said Webb. You said Webb. Okay, and Betty, which way are you leaning? Webb or Green? Okay.
Webb.
Yeah, I think we can't make the case for Greenwich, so it's got to be
Webb
Webb.
it is. Easy peasy.
Do we need a letter to somebody on this?
Well,
Resolution
part of
or
this
something?
is
No, so this is the same thing. So the South Central Transportation Coalition just wanted the list from us.
Okay.
What we think that touches Bel Aire, what we think needs to be done. So the big one was, because KDOT has talked about an interchange. It's just where, and so with the city saying we think it really needs to be Webb. And so that's important. And then if you were comfortable, we addressed all the other roads. I mean, at this point, at some point, if you do there's some simple things like decel and accel lanes would help.
Well-
Now, when an interchange goes in, then yeah, you would look at closing rock and then doing things
I mean,
like that.
this is kind of the same way as we just were kind of talking about our priority list for WAMPO. This entire road, there's priority list included, and all the stakeholders from Butler, Sedgwick County, all the towns along the road, kind of have their own say. Obviously, there's about 4 intersections that are the really dangerous intersections that are kind of everybody's top priority. I think the intersections are. When we started this, it was about safety along with economic development. I mean, everybody knows that you put in an intersection, it's going to spur economic development when you have safe access on and off. For Bel Aire, I think it's pretty easy for us to say the top priority for Bel Aire is that intersection. I think Keachai is probably on the same page. Sedgwick and Butler County, they obviously Towanda probably Ohio Street is probably their number one just because it affects them. Benton, the Benton Road is their there's probably about 5 interchanges. Yeah. Along the way there's also some other things, some R-cut turns that on a couple of county roads that it's a long way from the interchanges. You can have a right turn only, the U-turn safety thing in the middle, which would go along with the whole freeway concept because there are spots that the median's big enough to do that. So basically, I know there's a big big list of projects along this road to complete it, but it's not going to all happen at once. So that's why, as far as the city goes, we need to kind of churn in what our priority is as a stakeholder into the 254 Corridor Association.
So with the consensus tonight, Jeff and I will be testifying in November again between the joint sessions again with the House and Senate members like we did previously. But do we need an action item on the next agenda so it's a unanimous vote?
Yeah.
Or
because it's this is similar to what we're doing with WAMPO. Is we need to so like Jeff was saying. I've already sent out an email from the K254 Corridor Association for them to send in all of theirs. So Towanda and Benton, everybody, Butler County, Sedgwick County can send in what theirs. So the association, which Jeff will represent, will have a list of things, and then of course the mayor will represent Bel Aire and say, we think the North Junction is important. We support K254 improvements, and in fact, these are the ones that we think are very important for 254. So, right now, all I need to do is make sure that we get all of these in to the coalition and to 254. Then they can do their ranking and stuff, which they will rank their projects. The association will also, or the coalition will rank their projects, but that doesn't leave any stakeholder like a city, which is what the mayor will go in and say these are specific that we really support.
Because this is also the South Central Kansas Coalition. I mean, so it's which is made up of all the cities and counties. And,
Yep.
Basically, we want them to stop giving so much damn money to Johnson County.
I also want to say that I think your 2 option 1s are really where we should go. And I would suggest, although I don't want to be the designer, I suggest that the Webb Road interchange be a diamond interchange. It seems like that would make the most sense. I don't care whether Webb goes over or the freeway goes over. That doesn't matter to me. Just a diamond interchange would make more sense. I'm not real fond of the 127th Street issue, but I understand also that that's getting out there where the traffic is less, and so because and my reason I'm not excited about it is because it has people crossing the freeway, the highway, and it's just anytime you can avoid that, I'd like to avoid that. So I'm not real fond of that kind of a thing.
It's gravel road both ways, isn't it, on 127?
Yeah, and maybe what we can do is kind of put some caveats that if an interchange goes in at Webb, then maybe Rock and Greenwich could be closed. Like you said, maybe it's even 127th too.
Where are
because
those people?
an interchange would make a big difference on
Oh, yes, it does.
Yep.
It'll make a world of difference in the way.
And so maybe the thought is that some of these options for accel and decel are not real expensive compared to interchange and roads, and those would be short-term fixes, and then when the interchange went in, we'd look at traffic movements on all of them at that point. So,
All right,
Good with me.
okay, perfect. So we'll move on with that. It sounds like we've got a consensus there. So we'll invite our city attorney up. We're going to talk about city codes. The two items, we want to talk about backflow prevention. We brought that up at our last meeting. Before that, we want to talk about swearing in dates. And the reason why this came up is, we have an election in November, and then the way it's written is we're then seated in January. So that could leave, you hear the whole lame duck or whatever.
Lame duck.
Are we okay with that if that were to occur? So, Jackie, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you're exactly right. The election occurs on November 5th. It usually takes the election commission a couple of weeks to certify the election. So I wouldn't recommend putting it that very next week after the election or the week after that, because if you ever have a close race, that's going to be
Recounts.
yeah. So, and if it's on a year where we have a national race, it just sometimes might take longer. So that puts us into the fourth week in November, because 1st November, 2nd, and 3rd are out. That fourth week is usually around the holidays. So really don't recommend that. The holiday does fall on a Thursday. You could do it the fourth Thursday in November, or the fourth Tuesday in November. That's something to think about. The first date that I see as probably feasible is that first Tuesday in December. That's the 3rd. It's early. This year it's on the 3rd, but it would be perpetually that first Tuesday in November. The second Tuesday, that first Tuesday in December. The second Tuesday in December is also an option that could work. As you get into the 3rd and 4th Tuesday, you start getting into holiday travel and things like that as well, which then the next available week is the Tuesday that we have after the first Monday in December. That's where we are now. So
I guess our question is, do we want to move it up or do we want to leave it alone? And if we want to move it up,
right.
which date,
dates?
1st or 3rd and Tuesday, do we want to do it in December?
I think December the 3rd.
Just
The
to
third
clarify, the bill requires the start date to be on or after December 1st. Is that applicable to us?
And we're only talking December anyway because of all the conditions.
Well, I understand, but
I actually
so
do
you
see
couldn't
this.
do it in November. You don't even have the option to do it.
Right.
Right.
I was thinking
So
first
that
Tuesday in December makes
And I
the
think the
sense.
first Tuesday in
Me too.
December would be
First
the right
Tuesday in
thing.
December.
Yep,
Yeah.
we should change it. It should be the first regular meeting in December.
That way that does give one meeting if there is someone who loses his here to say goodbye.
I think that lands nicely between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yep.
Right.
That
And it's usually kind of a slow time here, gear them up for January, okay?
All right, and now that there's one more thing I want you to think about. That was really quick. One more thing I wanted you to think about. At the end of the year, we typically may handle any recodification. So all the ordinances passed throughout the year would be incorporated into our code. We handle the zoning updates and any kind of like, here's what we did this year in review, and just affirm any of those documents. I don't think moving having your new council or whoever takes seat on that first Tuesday in December would affect that, but I wanted you to think about it, whether you'd like to see the council that had been in session that whole year finish out all the formal end of year documents.
Well, let me ask you, could we do the swearing in at the end of the meeting?
At the end of that first Tuesday in December.
That way you allow the council to go out, if someone is, well, we know, Betty is not seeking reelection. There's two of us here who could possibly be replaced. If that, that would give a chance to, if that were to happen, say goodbye, wrap up with voting on the codifications and everything, and kind of transitioning maybe right.
Wouldn't that be
Might be
under
a good
old
idea.
business? And old business is taken care of before the council leaves their seats.
Well, the formal swearing in can be done outside of a meeting. It doesn't have to be within the formal bounds.
No,
of
I
the meeting.
meant the codifications and stuff. he was
Oh,
talking about.
yeah. No, that would be in ordinances and resolutions.
That's still under old business, isn't it?
I'm not really sure where that falls on the agenda.
No, we don't have anything in our codes about old or new business. So, in fact, the way that our agenda is set up is the way it reads in the codes. So there isn't anything about old or new business.
Yeah.
So
And
I actually like Mayor's suggestion there about that. Have the meeting, clean up those things, and
Out here.
Sorry, Betty, you're staying.
The third meeting in November would also kind of be the same as that, right? Because it would be after the election has taken place.
you could do it then. You could do your
So-
clarification stuff, and yeah.
So I don't know if that's possible. If we had any concerns about wanting the old council to, finish anything up before their last meeting, it could be handled that last meeting in November, just to remove any concerns about the first meeting in December.
Right. And the codification, again, is not a fixed thing. It's just something, because sometimes,
Yeah.
some years we'll get it done earlier, and some years we'll get it done later, just depending on other, like the year we did Tierra Verde, we waited because we had some other moving pieces that we wanted to incorporate. So it's something to keep in mind. We could absolutely try to keep in mind getting that done earlier, so that way, knowing that the new council would take seat the first meeting in December.
Right, because if we did it, after the meeting, on that first Tuesday in
Yes.
December, that'd be 2 meetings between the election and, the swearing in versus just the one that would already kind of naturally be there in November. So
So it
I'm not
sounds,
super passionate either way about
Yeah.
that, but
So I'm out the third, right?
At the end of the meeting.
Only if we pass an ordinance
Yeah.
sometime between now and then.
Yeah.
For what?
Otherwise, you're still here until January.
I would suggest that we keep that, knowing that the swearing in will happen at the end of the meeting. Just keep that swearing in general and say no later than the first meeting in December, then have a policy of swearing in after that meeting. So that way you don't have that in the code, that it has to happen after the first meeting.
Right.
you know.
Oh, yeah, that's smart.
Well, can't we do it in November?
Legally, no.
See those words right there?
And while we're at it, how come the Bel Aire mayor's elected every 2 years, but all the other cities are 4 years asking for a friend?
That's a good question. I can find that why out.
That's
Just
the way
looking
it
at
was
some-
set up in 1980.
There are some other cities that are longer. And maybe in 1980 our classification was different.
Yeah, because we weren't a city of the second class. I'm just
Exactly.
saying, I mean, I talked to other mayors like, again, weren't you just, I'm like, yep, every 2 years. And
Right.
Yeah, that's why, because Mr. Brookhauser didn't want to run more than 2 years.
so,
Because he was still teaching school at that.
okay.
Yeah.
So that sounds like,
See, I've worked with every mayor so far.
Okay.
I would recommend at your next meeting, an update to the charter ordinance that would make the new council get sworn in on at the first meeting in December.
And I can drive.
All righty, and then you want to talk about backflow prevention.
Yes, so I gave my report on this to council last meeting. Council requested we go back and we try to find some ways to make this work better. Staff is recommending that backflow preventers be due on June 1st or June 15th. It really doesn't matter which one, because the April 1st date is just, the weather is still unpredictable, and people can have freezing happen. So you would, if the report were turned into City Hall on April 1st, that means sometime in March that preventer would have been inspected, and March is even more unpredictable. So staff is recommending June 1st to June 15th.
Okay, I got a problem. I've been getting phone calls on these sprinkler letters. Some people do them in March. Some do it at the end of summer because they were never told. And one lady said, I don't even understand this letter. Well, then after she read it to me over the phone, I thought, I don't understand it either. But some plumbers or whoever does the sprinkler things does it right at, the end of February or March.
Right.
And then some people, they do them at the end of the summer.
Right.
When they shut them off.
Right.
So
We looked at.
do we have a policy that they have to do it? Because I think, didn't you
By
say
April
that?
1st is what our policy says.
Is
Yeah,
it
so-
April 1st?
By each April 1st. And that's why we're talking about changing
Changing that
it, is
date,
because if you do it in April 1st, that means your sprinklers have to be on, and
Yeah.
your backflow is actually above ground, and so
It has
because if you do it in April 1st, that means your sprinklers have to be on, and
Yeah.
your backflow is actually above ground, and so
it has
to be bad after.
Busted and
I had a company that installed it ever since, and I get the certificate every year. As a homeowner, to send that to the city and pay. It was telling me, hey, they got it certified by the city.
Right.
And so my bad.
you didn't know it either.
Okay, so
I said, well, I'm not.
Yeah. So to answer that, Stephanie thought it'd be better to leave it to the contractor. At a lower price, you can turn it in your card to wrangle contractors, and so that's one thing that she thought was probably as is.
yeah.
And now that we're doing more
That didn't say
educate people. And citizens will know.
Because now I
Mrs.
know.
Otto didn't know that she.
Right. So this year, she can call Stephanie. She'll sit down with her and go.
Know it.
So,
Address that before we move on. I'm sorry. You're saying a lot of people don't get them. Is that if people do not have their sprinkler systems, so their sprinkler systems haven't been in request, and then it would be taken off our list of
I
people who
didn't
get
say that.
category who
Yeah.
maybe don't use
Things
it.
that people
And
don't understand. I guess that's
I've heard from folks that haven't used their sprinklers to, send the water. I haven't used it, and I won't use it until the us to provide some sort of haven't used unless I start getting it inspected.
I think that
again,
makes
right?
more sense.
Well, years since I ran it. I mean, complete just.
They put the valve that they turned off when it
With mine actually busted, and I opted not to. So I technically have a sprinkler, but it's disconnected.
And water anyway. I mean, I think too many people.
H&E kind of standard. People to self-certify. We can, and Keith is and then take them off the list from then going forward. But because it's you know, you can say you're not connected to our water system, but do you really know what that means? Some people, I wouldn't know.
Well, it's just like them putting their water into the sewer line.
There's some pumps,
There are some pumps into the sewer line, right?
sanitary sewer, yeah.
I wouldn't want somebody coming in my house and going in the basement to see if I'm hooked into the sump pump. I don't think that's any of their business. I paid for the water,
Yeah.
but
So-
I know I can't do
So,
it.
Jackie, you're saying we don't have a legal option to say that folks can sign an affidavit saying that their system was, you know, winterized by a licensed contractor and that they haven't had it turned back on.
Katie, for our KDH&E, and I can defer to Ann, KDH&E, is
Will require
that a
that.
legal requirement though?
To ensure that everything has been fine, we need to make sure resident A from our water supply. In a form that says it's been disconnected. And verifies that it has been disconnected. And that's kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But we need to have that.
Because
as a city, we have a
there's got to be, you know, a reasonableness as well to what the city's obligation can be, because somebody can. The city's going to go around and every month inspect everyone's sprinkler system. That's a reasonable expectation.
So I think the way that, because of the staffing and other things, just when KDH&E does come down and do their audits or inspections, it's helpful to have all those, you know, preventer reports included. So that's one thing I would say. It's been working. We can look at some other ways to do it.
Yeah.
I would not recommend self-certification because I don't have a minimum standard of the certifier. That's just kind of my...
Okay.
It's very objective at that point,
But
too.
Jackie, I could tell you from working in the water department, there's a lot of smart people in Bel Aire, and
yes.
they will have you come out and, oh yeah, it's off, and you check it, it's off. Watch it, they'll turn it back on.
Which is what
Right.
you're kind of pointing to.
Right, and so, you know, at a certain point, there's only so much you can do, and if you
Right.
catch somebody doing that, you can have a penalty for it, and that's how you disincentivize it, is you have a penalty for people getting caught doing that.
Right.
So especially with this new system we're putting in for water bills and everything, it's all going to be computerized. Wouldn't that be able to catch anomalies? I mean, basically, if you're going from use in June, July, something wrong.
Right.
How much?
But again,
How many calls?
the point of in the system anyway. I mean, of a leak being any the homeowner's side, and a
What happens
yeah,
if
I
they
can
use
do
2
that.
or 3 water hoses?
All our computer systems do is they read the meter, and
there'd be a way. I'm sure there'd be a way to the normal water use.
You can create a dashboard based on, you know, your.
join the party. That is perfectly reasonable, and our but it takes staff time. That staff time every month. Now that we have the extra person, but it's not.
Well, and I didn't know if
It's not on a
the new
consistent
system that
basis.
we're getting would be even more.
The new system probably it is, but it will have that capability as well. But once again, the computer system just pulled data. It needs to have a person to go and review that. And
What
send out
about if
orders
they're
and
not
stuff,
using
so-
enough water?
If
I was up here 3 nights in a row, 900 gallons, 900 gallons, 900 gallons.
and it doesn't always
And
catch everything.
I've never used 900 gallons.
Well, I think your point is really good, Jeff, because if we have something like that where it can, flag it, if we've got somebody that said, yep, my water's turned off, my sprinkler.
You come look at my
You
lawn.
can't do that for
tell me
everyone,
water.
but you can only
Me
do so
either. I
much,
get it from
and you've got to set a
Lorraine
pay incentives in
because
a
my
right way.
yard's always flooded.
So, I think we should be looking at some options to make this process better for our homeowners, especially folks like Jeff who haven't used their sprinkler system in years and haven't, that water's disconnected. He probably shouldn't have to go pay, $100 or $200 for a plumber to come do something to his system that could, maybe easily be undone. In my opinion, I think that's not something that we.
Any
should
other
do either.
consensus? We want to move from March to summer month.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
good.
I actually like the November 1st recommendation personally.
Well, I thought that the June recommendation made more sense because it's right after the winter. And that's when you're most likely to have the.
You could possibly have freezing in November.
Yes.
That's true.
So
But
that's
you could do it any time before November if you selected November. So then you catch the people that did the spring winterization or the. Anything will be better than April 1st, though.
had about this is there's really arbitrary, or if there's a law, or some data that supports that, like me.
Somewhere, and I wish I had last for 7 years, but decided to set it at 5 years. So the life of the system is naturally.
So the manufacturers are saying their
Yes.
mean time between failure life.
I think Ann had.
The November versus June, because over the winter systems crack, and you're going to spring when you start it up. Early summer to make sure that anything that happened, you run. Recommended the June instead of the fall.
So hopefully there's
Yeah. And the concern is very real for freezing time. You're weighing your risks, as you had said.
So if one of those backflow preventers were being infected,
Has to flow back.
I can't really answer that because I'm not very familiar. Did a backflow prevention certification class. Very adept at being able to answer that, whereas I have not.
okay.
So
So maybe somebody else wants to weigh in, but for that, anytime where the city would
may have other information.
It's one of those things I think you have to have several pieces in place.
Yeah.
You don't want that perfect happening.
Yep.
We put rules on, say, the exotic pet shop. You know, could ever happen, so.
Anything else on backflow prevention?
Now, we're
That makes the most sense.
One other thing to think about from my, I think most people have somebody freezing, have this backflow certification. A lot of homeowners would be able to turn their because what's typically involved there is turning on sprinkler heads, which a lot of handy folks in Bel Aire. First, we were effectively going to be requiring folks with sprinklers to have the blowout versus. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a reason to make it.
Well, you always have that anyway. I mean, you always.
The homeowner can turn it on.
Yeah,
You can turn it on.
I never hired anyone to turn mine on.
Somebody to turn it off.
Well,
Sometimes I believe.
No, I'm saying, hey, you want to do in your yard?
well, most of them have
Yeah.
for winter.
Do blow them out themselves. Air compressors
Yeah.
are still-
You go to Home Depot.
Yeah.
And the professionals do.
I would do it like 3 times. Compressor. Talk about with backflow prevention.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, one more thing. Councilman contractors are able to figure out whether they're in Bel Aire or which not. And unfortunately, that's not something. We put them through a process where we check insurance, we check their address and location on an individual basis. And so it's on them to find out. It sounds like some of them go to GI. That would make them think. What we do, kind of following up with Stephanie on making sure you get a application, because Wichita is kind of on the same. We offer to send it back or send it. The relationship is reciprocal. In between that, kind of double check. And of course, our storage, once we get
Since they're filing the form, there's nothing, no electronic form filing that we have today. Is that true?
Put it on the water letter. Anybody that has a contractor come to their house, make sure they have a Bel Aire permit.
kind of set them on a date. In Bel Aire, we want to add this point of clarification to the code. It'll be posted on the website. The letters have gone out this year. Next year should be better.
Okay.
If we want to do something different about
That is a policy right now. That is a policy, because I read through the ordinance and I still had to follow up with Keith and Stephanie on how they deal with that. Yeah, I think it's something that they know Katie, because she went to that class, KDH&E accepts this as a.
So do we
alternative means.
need a policy that we adopt here, that we reference in that ordinance to say, to kind of tie those two together so that it's not maybe such an informal, you know,
Okay.
unknown
I see what you're saying.
process there?
Yeah, we can add a line referencing.
They could change as staff
Because
changes
it does
over time.
affect so many residents who don't use their sprinklers, maybe adding you're saying just generally refer to a policy that would go.
That we would then
Yeah.
document and adopt.
Yes.
So we actually have a policy on that.
So that would probably not come to you at this next meeting. If the ordinance came, we'd probably do that policy at a future meeting.
Okay.
Okay. And that policy would just cover backflow prevention or backflow systems that have gone offline. Is that what you're thinking, or do you want it to cover three?
It might be interesting to ask Stephanie if there are other kind of informal things that she does around this.
Don't make it too complicated because they don't understand it.
Yeah, and I think something that'll help with folks' understanding it is having all of this stuff in writing. And once it's in a written ordinance and a written policy, then we can have, you know, documentation that gets sent out or, you know, postings that actually.
So 7 calls.
Well, yeah, and to, you know, if we have this, it's something that we could even have a write-up that goes out in the water bill after we get through with all of
Or
this.
That's
you
why
see
I
the
keep
door
telling
hanger
you,
stuff
you
he
need
does?
to tell them in the water bill because they don't, older people don't keep computers anymore. They're not knowledgeable like you guys are.
Definitely a lot of marketing and kind of informing people.
So it doesn't help to tweet or Twitter or whatever you call it.
We want to discuss before I close our workshop.
We're almost 35 minutes late on the
Or 49, 50%, 51%. That leaning towards including it
Putting it in
in
the ordinance. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Those are a workshop and we're
Carol.